Entre's goal, we're a social network for entrepreneurs. Our goal is to connect entrepreneurs from all over the world to work together, to build great businesses, to learn from each other. And Shane and I were having a quick conversation before about just all the lessons that we learned. But if you don't know other entrepreneurs or you don't have access to those individuals with that knowledge, how do you learn from each other? So Shane, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about this. So you're a serial entrepreneur and investor.
Yeah.
Are you a 4-time or 5-time founder? I wasn't.
Well, I'll soon be a 4-time. Fortunately or unfortunately, we'll see. But yes, the three under my belt so far.
Awesome.
Three substantial things so far.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Principal of Neman Ventures, founder of EZ Texting and Joonbug, and a couple other companies. And you have invested in a portfolio of various companies, which we'll go into today. So where I usually like to begin, Shane, is your childhood, right? Growing up. What's your story? Where are you from, and what was that like?
Sure. Well, let me start with my parents. My parents are Iranian Jews that immigrated to the United States in the late 70s. They left during the Iranian Revolution. There was a big, kind of refugee movement coming out of Iran around that time. And they landed in Brooklyn, where I was born, and then we moved to Queens and then Long Island. And my parents really kind of came here with absolutely nothing. That kind of classic immigrant story of coming here with nothing and seizing the opportunity. They did different things in the first few years that they were here, and that they really instilled the entrepreneurial spirit, because I was watching them this whole time, right? And they ended up opening a women's fashion boutique in New York City, and they did that for a while, and then they started their own fashion line, their own clothing brand, and they basically built a factory in our basement in our house in Long Island, and that's where their fashion line came from. And they would stay. I remember, I was only like in, I don't know, maybe second grade or something, or first grade or whatever, but I remember sleeping in the basement because I was kind of there was a few stories and I was too scared to kind of sleep alone up there until like 3 a.m. while they were making clothes, and there was paint splatter all over the place. It was during the 80s, so like that kind of like glitter and splatter thing was in fashion. And that's how I grew up, watching my parents try and make it. And they were pretty successful. And then my father passed when I was young, when I was around 13. And it was just my mom, and basically, she couldn't run the business by herself. And so I learned from her even more, actually, how to survive, because, she barely had like a high school education. And, she went into real estate, and there were some hard times during that time, but, she taught me a lot during that time of how to become successful in real estate, and always look at the bright side of things, and hustle and not give up, and all the kind of cliche things you hear about, entrepreneurs. And she was like the consummate entrepreneur, actually, and I learned mostly from her. And so, that I think my entrepreneurial spirit growing up came from her. I remember in 3rd grade, I was selling like neon shoelaces to my classmates, because you'd have to go to the city to get them, and they didn't sell them in Long Island, and I was making like $1 a shoelace or something, and then I always had my kind of like my finances on my mind, because it wasn't very stable for me. So I was a bank teller in high school. And then in college, I ended up going to NYU for college, and I moved to the city after that. And I became a web programmer, and I was a TA for, for my classes to make money during that time. After college, I actually tried to go down the traditional path of being a good, like in the structure of what your parents want you to do, right? Like I went to med school, right? And I went to NYU Med, right? And that didn't really last very long, to tell you the truth. I had already kind of gotten the taste of working and hustling and, all that. And I had a roommate at the time who happened to be a friend of mine from high school. And we were living on like 30 something in Park Avenue, I remember. It was really close to the medical school at that time. And he was working at Goldman Sachs, and he was he was like a first or second year at Goldman Sachs. And it was during the dot-com boom. There were, at that time, basically anything went. And he came up to me and he said, "What are you doing? Let's start a .com together, and I'll get the money and you do the tech, and you know how to do the tech." And I don't know, it took like 3 hours, and it was on a Sunday. And then the next day I didn't go to school, and I never looked back from there. So that's the like kind of story of how, the growing up and going into business story for me in particular.
I love it. I love it. And I like the story. I want to go a little bit back to your parents, you have like these American immigrant stories. My parents are immigrants from Greece. They come to America. They don't have much. So, they don't want to go back, right? Or sometimes they can't go back in certain cases. And they're there to, they need to thrive. They need to be successful because they've given everything up to do that, right? And I actually lost my father when I was in my teens as well. And I totally understand what happens when, especially the one person, the spouse that makes the most money is gone. And that whole, finance, that line of income just goes away. And you're like, hey, I got to grow up overnight because I need to like make money and help my family out. So I get that. And I think that probably gave you some of your edge of who you are. And might even gave you some financial anxiety over the years, like
it gave me fear. It gave me the fear.
Yeah, of the fear.
It really
right?
did.
So
it's that fear. It's funny because I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, right? And no matter how successful they are, that fear still exists in them, right? It's in the back of their mind because they remember what it was like. And it really sucks, to kind of, it's constant anxiety. It's almost like an anxiety fire that burns inside you. It's, I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, sometimes it comes through tragedy. Sometimes you're born with it. And I think sometimes, when you build on your own success, you can build it within you, so, there's different ways to get it, I think.
absolutely. And so let's talk about college, right? So you followed the typical, I'm going to become a doctor, right? I'm going to med school. And then something happened and you met a friend and you had a friend, you guys decided to start a business together. You leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
What
it was
happened
hard. It was hard.
What happened with your mother? Like now you have to have this conversation with her. What happened? You don't have to go too detailed, but I want to know the parameters of how that
actually went. That was it, in my mind, that was the hardest part, but it turned out to be the easiest part, telling my mom. And she, in all reality, she paid for my education. She beat the odds and she became successful. She became a successful real estate entrepreneur after, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of, really having a very hard time. And med school, is very expensive, as you can imagine. She had already paid for my first semester, so I was pretty anxious about it, because I couldn't go to work and go to med school. That's very hard. But I did kind of make money on the side and paid for other parts of my college during undergrad. And I was a computer science major, and I mainly did that because I thought to myself, well, I don't know. I'm always thinking about the worst case scenario, right? Like, if I don't get into med school, right, at least I could get a job, being a software developer or something like that. That's what I was really kind of thinking. And it was my fallback plan. It actually turned out to be my main plan. But yeah, that day it was a Sunday morning. My friend from Goldman, my friend who was working at Goldman, was my friend from high school. He would go out Sundays and go to Sunday brunch, right? And I was sitting there drinking, like, in my room reading biochemistry or something, and miserable. And he came to me with this idea, kind of the light bulb went off and made a lot of sense. And I kind of wanted it inside. And I don't know, there was this fear of, look, being pre-med is a lot of work, right? You got to do all the work for it. You got to take the MCATs. It was a lot of extra work that I had done throughout the years. And I took all these courses that I didn't love. Like, I didn't love physics. I didn't love biochemistry. Like, I don't know too many people who do, right? But I did it as a means to an end, and I happened to do well at it because of that fear. That same fear that kind of drove me to get good grades and get into med school and stuff. I feel like that same kind of fire of anxiety helped me through through being an entrepreneur and business. And after I kind of like decided, I closed my book and I told my friend I would do it. And then the fear of talking to my mom about it set in. And I called her like an hour later and I kind of beat around the bush. And really surprisingly, she said, I love you. I trust you. I think that, you need to do what you think is right. And that's all I need, like that sealed the deal for me once she said that. Because really, you never know how you affect someone with what you say. And it could be your mom, it could be your uncle, it could be your, it could be your neighbor, it could be anyone, right? It could be me who says something right now and it changes something in you, right? And that was it for me at that point. That really kind of switched my thinking right away.
So in which company was this that you started with your friend?
So that company was called Offix. And the premise of that company was, at that time, we called it an ASP, which was an application service provider, right? And it was basically a web portal for small to medium-sized businesses this is what we ended up developing, right? Through Citrix technology. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Citrix. They have GoToMeeting now and a couple other things, but at that time it was kind of like really new technology, right? And the idea was, you're a small to medium-sized business, you log into the Offix portal, and we had an app store before the word app store existed, right? Like, we didn't have the terminology for this stuff that you're hearing, right? Like, this was the cloud at its best, right? And like, we didn't call it the cloud, we called it like utilitizing computing. We didn't even know how to describe it, right? It was kind of hard. Anyway, so he ended up raising a few $1 million. And I don't know, at that time, it sounds crazy, but at that time it was during the dot-com boom again, and crazy shit was getting funded that made no sense. And they gave a bunch of 22, 23-year-olds that kind of money, who have we had no track record either, right? Just ourselves talking, and we got the money. We actually built a viable product. We got customers. it ended up failing, mainly due to, the fact that we were way ahead of the game. Broadband penetration was not there. Businesses were not there mentally to kind of pay a monthly fee for, like right now you talk about SaaS, right? Like everybody pays for Dropbox or, whatever else that they're paying for, or I don't know, Salesforce or whatever else they're using, they pay a monthly fee for, but that's not how it was back then, right? It was totally foreign concept. And so we were way too early in the game in that. And then, the bubble burst, right? And the money dried up and 9/11 happened and, all these other things. And we were in New York City. And so, that didn't work out. And unfortunately, I had actually put in all the money I had saved up throughout the years into my business also, and on top of whatever the investors had put in. And I was like totally broke after that.
So what happened? Because I've been there once or twice myself. What happened? So what's going through your mind? Like, because I remember my moment. I'll tell you first. When we worked together those years, that company that I own, we lost like half our clients in a matter of a month. We were over leveraged. I started borrowing and putting money on my own personal credit cards, which is worse because you dry up your savings, you could walk away. When you put yourself into debt, it's 10 times worse, which I know.
It's 100% worse.
And I remember I come out of the office, we just cleaned out the office, we had to move, and we basically get rid of everything. And I'm standing on the corner of 34th Street and 8th Avenue. And there's
Penn Station.
Yeah. No, 7th Avenue. I'm sorry. 7th Avenue.
Okay.
And there's a homeless person on the corner, and I put my hand in my pocket, and I think I had like $2 left, right? And that's all I had to my name. And I look at him and I go, I think he has more money than I do at this moment. And that was like the reset button. I realized that, as unfortunate it was for him being homeless, I wasn't too far off. I had a place to stay, but I had no money. I just wiped everything out. And I realized that, okay, I need to rebuild myself. And it was a long process, but it happened. I paid off all the debt. I reset myself. And I swore I would never be an entrepreneur again, that I would literally go get a job. That didn't happen. And, we continued from there. So tell me your story now. How'd you feel? What happened to you?
So I was lucky in many respects. First of all, I had my mom, right? And I had my family that lived in New York. I wasn't going to become like homeless, you know what I mean? But so it wasn't, a crazy dire situation for me. But I was also kind of ashamed, to be honest. I didn't want to like ask, for money, or, I didn't want to like admit that, I failed. I didn't want to do that to my mom. I didn't want to like in front of my family or friends or, whatever crazy shit's in your mind that you think about that's not real was happening to me, right? So essentially, I don't know if you remember, I had a partner in JoonBug. Her name was Ariana. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember, yeah.
Okay, and so Ariana was actually my girlfriend at the time when this happened, and she was going to FIT in the city, and she worked the door at all these different nightclubs at the time. Like, I don't remember, there was like O-Bar and System and
Lot 61.
Yeah, there was all these nightclubs, and she did that on the side, to kind of make money. And I moved in with her actually to save on rent. And, I was in the FIT dorm or something for a while. And like living out of a garbage bag, right? And basically, I started going out because I didn't really have much else to do. I was kind of down and out. There wasn't really a lot of opportunity for software developers because 9/11 just happened and the bubble burst. And so there wasn't, like now there's a huge demand for anyone who knows how to do anything tech related, right? But, there had been before the bubble burst, and then there was a long amount of time where no one wanted to even talk tech, right? So I started going out, and I started going out in clubs, night bars, restaurants, whatever, with Ariana or wherever I was going. And I started to notice that, the nightclub guys or the bar owners or the event guys, or they were like kind of still doing things super backwards, right? And old school. They were, they had guys handing out printed flyers outside, and they had, these people going around having you sign up on putting your name and phone number and address on a piece of paper, and then they were like having people call you during the day to invite you to an event, or it was just like all backwards. It was really backwards, and I'm like, well, these guys need to come into the real world, right? And so, or the new world, let's just put it that way, right? So that's where JoonBug kind of came out of, right? It was my attempt to like digitize events and nightclubs and bars. And it started out just as simple as people don't know where to go, right? Like the information of, go to this place on that night because this is happening in your area, and event discovery was not there, right? So just having that information available to people was the start of it, right? And so, we created the JoonBug website, and then we started the email list, and we were the first email to kind of go out and, give a list of the events that are happening that week and where's good to go. And then we kind of built the technology stack on top of that, right? So then we started doing photos, right? And you have to understand, this is like pre-Facebook, pre-MySpace, pre-iPhone camera, right? Pre all of that, right? Like it all sounds like kind of like stupid now, but then it was like it was not possible. A digital camera that was 1 megapixel was like $2,000 or something crazy like that. And so anyway, we started doing event photos. We started doing ticketing systems, like electronic ticketing systems, and all these other technologies for events. And that's how you and I met. I remember now, although we put 2 and 2 together after this, right? Anyway, so that's really how JoonBug came about, is from just kind of looking around me and seeing how I could apply the internet, or and I knew a lot about the internet because I was working on the internet and software and that kind of stuff, or whatever I knew and apply it to my environment at the time, right? And that's where it came out. And we ended up becoming pretty successful. We started doing events ourselves, and using our technology for our own events and for other people's events, and we sold tickets, and we were doing, I don't know, towards the end, before I sold the company, we were doing tens of millions of dollars in transactions for events and sponsors and all these other things that we had going on. And we had, I don't know did you ever come to our office then?
Yeah.
Jimmy? Yeah. So like, we had a few, I think at some point we were at a few hundred people or something like that. And so, that was for me, that was almost a 10-year run. Starting in like the dorm room, and just to kind of circle back, I was very intent on not raising money for the next company. And the reason why is, that previous time with Offix, it was really hard to kind of look people in the eye and be like, sorry, you know, like, it's not my fault, but you know, you lost all your money, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't want that responsibility anymore. I wanted to answer, you know, it's okay if I do it to myself, right? But I didn't really want to answer to anyone else. I didn't want to have to deal with, you know, telling them why we can't do certain things. You know, it's very hard from an investor's point of view to kind of put themselves in the position of the entrepreneur and them being in the mix and understanding their business. So I just really didn't want that. And so I did a lot of work on the side, and I saved up like 10 grand or something. And, you know, I started JoonBug with that. And
So
then I started from there.
did you ever end up raising any money for JoonBug, or you just kind of just reinvested the whole time?
No, we just ended up, I mean, I took a small salary in the beginning, and then we ended up, I ended up just kind of saying to myself, you know, this might be the thing that I do for the rest of my life. I wasn't building the business to be like, oh, you know, I'm going to make this into a, I don't know, $100 million business and go public and that. I was just kind of dealing with the day to day. I was like, you're only as good as your last party in this business, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's true.
It's true. Like, so like if you have a shit event, or you have like a, you know, or you do a bad job, you know, you're canceled, right? So that's, you know, I had no time to kind of think about that. I was just really kind of thinking about, how do I, you know, get to the next level this year, and I'll deal with what happens with next year. And then, good.
No, I was going to say for JoonBug, because I was one of your, you know, clients, I guess, or whatever. I used you guys a lot, and because we were producing a lot of events, and for us, I agree, the technology was mundane, and like you look at it now, and everyone's like scratching their heads, like, what? Photographers, like people, but it was a totally different world. Word of mouth was the main engine that promoted all these events, right? And there was no technology or platform to promote it, right? Now you look at Facebook and the shareability and the access that you have with one click of a button, it's totally different. But what I loved about the model that you guys had was you approached the event producers, the promoters, the bar owners, and said, hey, there's all these people coming here, they're having an experience, we'd like to capture it for free. We're going to send the photographer to your place at no charge, right? And I was like, wow, that's, because it was like $250 per event. So if you're producing several events, it adds up to a few thousand a month. And I was like, wow, I can't believe, you know, JoonBug's covering this cost, at least initially. I don't know if later you started charging, but and then I realized, then I realized what your plan was. Your plan was capture the content, redirect people to your website, and then have them, you know, purchase
their data,
get their data, right?
Yeah.
And it was all authentic because they accepted, because they wanted the photos, and then you had a huge database. Then you do something even different, right? So something that kind of shocked me. You send out emails and people RSVP, and then you give the promoters the contact info. You gave them the email and said, here's the person's email, which I was like, I don't get it. Why would they do that? Well, because we were paying for it, you were supplying us with, you know, data, right? Mm-hmm. So you became our data partner, really, you know, throughout this whole thing. And I loved it. And I thought, you know, the events that you guys did, the partnerships, it was great. So you had a partner, right? What happened with that? Because now she's your girlfriend. Like, how did that work out?
Oh, you know, no one's ever asked me that question. That's a really good question. So it's very hard to be in a relationship with someone and also work with someone. And it proved to be the same for us. It didn't work out in our relationship. Within a few years, can you imagine? We were together during the day and at night, because we had events at night till like 4. So it was like, and there was the stress of, you know, the business and all that kind of stuff. And we really, you know, respected each other a lot, and we had this kind of baby that you know, we had built, and it was really successful. So we thankfully, we're very level-headed and let's say responsible about it. And we kind of realize that, you know, we kind of have to go our own ways, but, you know, keep this business running
Mm-hmm.
because it was very successful and neither of us wanted to lose it.
Right.
And so in that respect, we got very lucky. And sometimes that happens and sometimes it's ugly, and thank God it wasn't ugly. And I'm still friends with Ariana. She's married and has kids, and she went on to actually create a very big events company after we sold our JoonBug also. It's called Save the Date. You know, unfortunately with COVID now, you know, events are, you know, at a standstill, but pre-COVID, you know, they were doing really big corporate events, charity events, and that kind of stuff.
So let's talk about, sorry, Shane, I didn't mean to cut you off. Let's talk about the acquisition. So now you're successful and you hit a point where you want to sell, or somebody approached you about buying, or, and then you.
So, okay, so let me kind of rewind. In around 2005 or so, what had happened is that, as you know, all the kind of event producers, bars, every business had like a Constant Contact or a MailChimp account, right? And they started taking their own photos, and everybody kind of got hip to this data idea, right? And you know, we went from being the only game in the inbox with kind of telling you about what was going on to, like, I don't know, everybody was getting like 20 different, 30 different emails, right? And you're just going into their spam. Like, people they don't have enough attention for that, right? So I was really kind of looking for a way to cut through the clutter and go around the inbox, right? And 2004 or 5-ish, people started texting a lot more. You know, BlackBerries started to become more popular. And so texting kind of took off in the US. It had been pretty popular in the UK and Europe for a while. But, you know, I think with the advent of the BlackBerry, it made it easier to text. And so people started texting, and I'm like, well, hey, you know, how do we text? You know, we have everyone's phone number. Like, how do I text them instead of emailing them? And I'll be the only text in town or something, you know, that kind of thought. That's what I was thinking. And lo and behold, I started researching, Google searching, and, you know, there was no like out of the box, off the shelf solution for texting, right? Just like, you know, there is for email, right? There's, you can use MailChimp constantly. There's like a million ESPs out there, right? And so I figured, I realized that there's no solution, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to build this myself. And so I decided to build it, and we called it EZ Texting. And initially it was a tool that we only used internally within JoonBug, right? So we kind of had this database, and we started testing it, and I built a prototype of it, and it was only kind of, it was really kind of, the alpha version was like really shitty, you know, like a shitty like UX. It's very simple, right? And it could only do like 4 or 5 different things, like send a text and upload your contacts and a couple of other things. And then, you know, but it worked, and it did the job, and what I thought was, you know, let me call a couple of our customers, you know, some of the promoters, bar owners and stuff. I'll sell this into them, and it'll subsidize the cost of the development of this. And essentially, within a few months of doing that, we were getting calls from other people being like, how do we get this texting program? And not only that, we were profitable, right? It wasn't just subsidizing it. It was like making money. And so I realized that this is a business in itself. And I ended up wanting to focus more on that, because I saw that there was a lot more opportunity there, because this wasn't just you know, a tool that was for nightclub owners and bar owners and events people. This is like, you know, every business should be using this, right? Like schools, emergency text, nonprofits, you know, businesses that want to, you know, do couponing and all that kind of stuff, right? And so that's when I kind of thought, all right, you know, I've had enough of this business of events, because events are kind of like you got to kind of reinvent yourself every year, right? You know, you're only as good as your last event, like I just said, right? You know, it's stressful, but you know, this was like a SaaS business, and I said, you know, this is really the business I want to be in, and I think that this can kind of really change things for the business landscape, and I believed in it a lot. And so that's how the sale of the company came about, is you know, just kind of focusing on EZ Texting, and you know, letting a competitor, I don't know if you remember John Gable, but he had Sky Events, and they were like our biggest competitor. They would do events that would compete against us. And so we had a suitor, and I said, let's do it. You know, I've had enough, and I was also getting older, and I wanted to get married, and I wanted to have kids, and all this other stuff, which would be very difficult to do otherwise, you know, while owning JoonBug, pretty much.
So, so you transition, you sell JoonBug. Do you stay on at all? Is it like an advisor? Or you completely just you're done?
No, we were done, because honestly, the business was pretty straightforward, and you know, it was a strategic acquirer, so they were in the same business that we were, and so they understood our business very well. They had their own ticketing system. They had a lot of things that were like overlapping, and so you know, we stayed on for just like a little bit of time, but I was already kind of long gone on and focusing mostly on EZ Texting anyway at that point.
So you shift over to EZ Texting, same strategy, don't raise money, just kind of bootstrap it and build it.
Yeah, so I took the profits from JoonBug. I sold my car, I sold my house. I initially mortgaged my house and my apartment, and then I sold it. I sold pretty much everything that I had to finance it myself. I didn't want to do that either for that one. And the reason why is that I already kind of saw some success in it. And I figured to myself, well, you know, if I can raise this money myself, I don't have to give away, you know, part of the company. And I was fortunate enough to have obviously a business that was successful beforehand, and I had made some money. And so instead of going out and raising, I ended up just kind of doing it all myself and taking you know, the risk by myself. And I think that is really one of the key components to the success of the business. You know, I had a lot to lose. Really, quite frankly, it wasn't just, you know, I had like everything to lose, so I had to make it work no matter what happened, and I had to grow it, and I had to be successful at whatever cost, at whatever loss of sleep, of whatever, you know, amount of work I needed to do. That's what I did, essentially.
So I want to talk to you about, and this is all fantastic stuff. I just want to say, Shane, you,
Thanks.
JoonBug, you had a couple hundred people working. EZ Texting, like how big was the employee pool?
So actually, a couple of people from JoonBug came with me. That, you know, they didn't want those employees anyway, because they already had some overlap, and I was really lucky that they did, because most of the guys and girls, and you know, this is one thing that kind of was a recurring theme also, is I always had more women working, at least in positions that were kind of higher up and closer to me, than men. And I've always found that to be a successful formula for me. I don't know why, but just, you know, for whatever that's worth, I highly suggest it. Anyway, some people came, and then we hired more people, and we were actually initially just a team of like 6 people. And on 34th and 7th, we had we moved to 30. We went from Chelsea on 21st between 5th and 6th. We had a big office in Junebug. I went into this like small 400 square foot office. I went from like glitz and glam to like, you know, slumming it for a while. And we went into a 400 square foot office. Our desks were butted next to each other. We were on top of it. One of my employees had his desk in the closet. Albert, I'll never forget it. And we were like a small but really highly talented and official team. So that's and we didn't have that like whole thing that you see where, you know, you had the ping pong table and the refrigerator full of Gatorades and you know, all this other nice stuff that people think about when they think about tech startups, right? Like we had like used furniture that I had bought off of Craigslist, right? And, you know, we had like normal Dell computers, you know, and, you know, we had like a normal phone system. We had no decoration, nothing. Like it was really kind of a real startup at that time.
And did you hire more as time went on? Did you build out the team more, or did you kind of stay lean? And
So
the reason why I'm asking is I want to know about how you hired people,
okay.
especially during Junebug. Like, how did you vet your employees, and how did you retain them, and or how did you screen them before you hired them?
Well, back then it was a lot harder when Junebug, because, you know, basically you had Monster and Craigslist. Those were your two options. So, you know, like we fired a lot of people. We would hire people and then fire them. It was just, that was the game. And, you know, a lot of the people who we didn't, they stuck around for years and years. Mainly because I think we were very open. I was very open, especially with EZ Texting. One of the things that I did was even though our company was really small at the time, I think we were like up to 10 people. I created a company newsletter, and it was only for 10 people. But, you know, everybody had their own function, but no one kind of got the whole picture of the company, right? They didn't know how much money we were making. They didn't know what new partnerships we had. They didn't know what new software features were coming out. They didn't know a lot of things that, you know, may be going on behind the scenes. And I thought it would be really important for everyone to understand all aspects of the business. And once I started doing that, you know, it just caused a cohesion that I hadn't seen before, really. And most of the people that we hired ended up becoming friends of friends, because people loved working there, and, you know, they said good things about it, or, you know, and then what happened is specifically for EZ Texting, which I think is interesting, is, you know, we were a tech company first and foremost, and so we needed tech talent. Right. And, you know, as you know, it's expensive to get tech talent. Developers and software guys and girls are really hard to come by. And when you find good ones, they're very expensive. And that went against our staying lean motto, right? So we started to outsource. And we started to go to the Ukraine. My CTO at the time was a woman named Luba, and she was Ukrainian. Again, the woman theme, right? Not too many women CTOs, but she's awesome. Like best tech CTO I've ever worked with. And she's like, look, you know, we can try and do this here. Why don't we just go to the Ukraine for 3 months, set up an office there, hire all these like, you know, great PhD people for a quarter of the price that it is here. You know, students, you can get like, you know, rocket scientists basically, right? For a quarter of the price there. And they have a very similar, let's say, like culture to ours, because a lot of times the biggest issue with outsourcing is the culture gap and the things that get lost in translation. And it doesn't happen, I don't know, it didn't happen to us that much in the Ukraine, because I guess, you know, everyone's kind of, the younger generation is on the internet, they're on Facebook, they're on social media, so they kind of get everything that's going on, more so now than before. And so we did that. We went to Ukraine and we hired there. And that ended up being one of the best decisions that we ever made. We had half our team there, and we had awesome developers that, you know, were able to accomplish things that many developers here wouldn't be able to do. And we did it at a fraction of the price with a very cohesive team.
Okay. And do you have, so that company you ended up, it gets acquired as well, right?
Yes. So after about another 8 or 9 years of that, we ended up building the company to something around, we had over 20,000 customers using our system. And at the time, you know, SMS was still kind of overlooked, right? And people weren't, you know, now you look at like companies like Twilio, right? And like, it's all the rage. It's a public company. It's worth like, I don't know, billions of dollars. And all they do is text messaging and calls, right? It's an API that does that. Right. But when I was doing it, people were telling me it was like, oh, it's like some antiquated technology. It's all about apps and in-app messaging and in-app notifications, and text messaging is like dead, and you know, whatever. That let's just say that they were completely wrong. And had I listened to them, it would have been in a very different place. If I listened to every critic that was out there. So what happened is that there was we actually had a client called Callfire, and they did essentially what we did, but for calling instead of for SMS. And they needed an SMS component, and they were initially using our API to do SMS, but they really wanted a like a full, yeah, like a full user interface kind of situation going on. And so they approached me, and they had a very similar story to me, right? Except they were 5 founders, but they started the same time. They started in California. They built their business. They were scrappy. We were like of the same mental state, pretty much, and a very similar kind of history. And they raised money through Morgan Stanley and ended up buying EZ Texting.
So you get acquired. At this point, do you stay on, or do you kind of like same thing as JoonBug, you moved on?
Yeah, I stayed on for like 3 years after that, mostly because I wanted to, and I wanted to see the company grow and help integrate the 2 companies. I helped them acquire more companies. I was head of product, so I helped build the integrated product. And that's what I really love to do. I love doing product development. And after about 3 years, I realized, you know, it was time to move on. And I had my first child, and there was, yeah, thank you. And well, this was, I guess this is like 2000, I say 2015 or 16, or yeah, it was 2016. So, you know, I wanted to, you know, focus on different things at that time. And so I still am involved with the company a little bit, but I'm not on the day-to-day side of stuff.
And during that transition, did it allow you to kind of work on the next thing? Like while you were there, you were doing that, but you were also like thinking, hey, am I done here, or am I looking for other opportunities? Like, what is my next plan? Because that's the big thing, right? As an entrepreneur, you build, and then you either you sell or whatever, and then you have to step away, right?
Yeah, it was weird.
Some entrepreneurs are like, here you go, take it. I'm like completely done. Others are like, they need to have that control. They need to stay on. And sometimes they ride the ship all the way till it sinks, right? Which is not a good scenario. So I know you have your venture company in real estate and you've invested in other companies. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, you know, I know your mother got you into the real estate because that's what, you know, she set the groundwork for. And you've been doing that for some time. Let's talk about that. And then let's talk about some of the companies that you invested in and why did you invest in some of those companies?
Sure. So I think the real estate came from the old school mentality of, you know, my family being an immigrant family and being like, you need to, you know, whatever money you make, you have to kind of buy real estate with, you know, because they're not like really thinking about stocks and bonds and other types of investments like VC or businesses or that kind of thing, right? So I kind of have that bias instilled into me from, you know, from childhood. And so I have done quite a bit of real estate investing from that, and you know, whatever money that I did put aside for, you know, investing, I've throughout, let's say, this whole time I've been doing real estate, and I've also done, I don't know if you remember in New York, but like the New York real estate market, New York City real estate market up until now was like crazy, right? Like you know, you could buy like a studio apartment, fix it up a little bit and then flip it and make a little bit of money. And throughout this whole time, I was kind of doing that. I was almost like a nomad, right? Like I would live in an apartment for like you know, a year, fix it up in my spare time and then sell it and then upgrade or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. So that's where it kind of came from. And you know, I like it. I know it, so you know, I had a lot of experience with it because of my mother, and helping her with that. So it was something that I knew and I stuck with. But really, you know, the more interesting stuff is the businesses and the VC, right? And I think, you know, when I was leaving EZ Texting, that's what I was thinking, is like, maybe it's more time for me to kind of help other business, you know, other entrepreneurs and other businesses grow however I can, whether it's, you know, you know, with money, or whether it's with helping them build their business with my experience, or just advice and that kind of stuff, or putting, you know, I have connections, so you know, I can connect people and that kind of stuff.
And so you're investing in like different startups, like any startups in particular that you've invested in that, you know, you want to share with us?
Recently I actually invested in a New York City based startup. This is like pre-Series A actually. It's called the ResiDesk, and what they do is actually they combine two things that I love. They have this messaging app, right? So it's a lot of text messaging and stuff like that, and email, and it's kind of like one box. And what it does is it integrates into property management software for residential buildings. So there's a bunch of them out there. There's like AppFolio and Buildium and a bunch of other ones that a lot of building managers use. And it allows the property managers to kind of talk to and effectively service the tenants in those buildings, because right now it's a very like hodgepodgey kind of system, and no property management system has a very effective means of kind of bringing all the channels, whether it's calls, emails, text messages, into one centralized app. So that's what they're doing. And then they also have AI that they apply to that app that can kind of tell you, hey, you know, this tenant is on the verge of not renewing their lease because they're unhappy, and they're using Google Sentiment Engine to do that, right? So they're very smart guys, two guys, two young guys out of New York City, and they managed to sign up even during COVID, because people need to do emergency messaging, you know, a bunch of buildings in New York City.
Wow, that's awesome. And what's your criteria when you're like, you know, you're looking at these businesses to invest in? Like, what are you looking at? You know, what's like 2 or 3 criteria that usually you're looking for?
You know, I really don't think of it that way, Jimmy. You know, like I have different I have like, I have an investment in Universal Standard, which is the largest now plus size fashion brand, right? For women, right? And that's like the farthest thing you could get from tech, right?
Right.
And you know, I came in like Series B on that one, right? Like I didn't come, you know, so I'm more of like an opportunist, and I kind of really go with
So
doing research on it.
so Shane, let me rephrase that. When I say criteria, I mean, what are you looking at in the founders in the company,
Sure,
right?
that's
So
good.
so not like how much they made or whatever, but more of like the DNA of the company. How do you know or think that you think this is going to be successful?
Well, I actually asked them a lot of the things that you asked. You know, I want to know the struggles that they've gone through and how they've dealt with it. It's not very important to me whether or not they've done a business before and failed or succeeded. You know, that's irrelevant. I think that, you know, just because you built a successful business once doesn't mean you're going to do it twice or 3 times.
That's true. A lot of people
Yeah,
think that it will be successful the second time, but it's not true.
no, it's not. In fact, I think you have a better chance if you've had multiple unsuccessful companies. Because if you're trying to start a business after you've failed 2 or 3 times, I kind of bet this time around it's going to work for you, because you've got the drive and the more emotional fortitude to get up and do it again, right? Like, and that, you know, that's really like 95% of this is, you know, it's great to be intelligent. Don't get me wrong. You need intelligence and you need to be smart, and those are really great traits to have, right? But like 95% of all this is like, can you take an emotional beating, and how do you deal with it after you do it, right? Like, and will you give up when, you know, there's like no options available to you? How do you deal with stuff like that, right? Because, you know, I kind of gave you the glamorous story about EZ Texting, right? But like, dude, there were like so many nights that I didn't sleep, and I was an emotional wreck because some catastrophic thing happened that I thought I lost everything, right? Whether it was like a lawsuit that came my way, you know, that like wanted millions and millions of dollars that would have bankrupted us, right? To, I don't know, our servers going down for a week, right? And us scaling, and we can't get our database back up, and all this other crazy shit that happens, right? And that's the truth of the matter. There was much more of that happening than the good stuff,
Right.
right?
But here, so we're transitioning, I guess, into mental health now, which I
Yeah,
wanted to talk to you about. So
yeah.
as an entrepreneur, you're steering this boat, you're getting hit from left and right. How did you cope with that? Like, how did you deal with it? Like, I know that sometimes there's small punches, but sometimes you get big punches, or you get a lot of rapid small punches that can knock you over. How did you get through, like, mentally? What did you do to get you through that struggle?
You know, now I have a lot more tools at my disposal, and I'm much older, and you know, I'm much more seasoned. I wish I had the tools that I have now to deal with stress and these issues back then, but I really like almost cried all the time. You know, like I not publicly, but like, you know, I was very lucky that I was in a relationship with you know, a girlfriend or my wife or someone who, you know, helped me emotionally. And I would talk to them about it a lot, and they were a big support for me. But, one of the things that kind of helped me a lot is, reading, just kind of listening to other people's stories, how they got through it. And, this actually, one of the biggest tools that helped me a lot is later on is I watched this TEDx of Tim Ferriss, and he had this fear setting exercise. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yeah. I know this one. Yeah.
Okay, and I actually did
Well,
it.
tell us about it, because I don't think everybody knows what it is.
So I haven't done it in a while. I did it like a few years ago, but I realized that I was inherently doing it before, right? And the gist of it is that you kind of you sit down and you figure out like what's going on, and you write it down on a piece of paper, and then you write down all the different scenarios, and you look at what the worst case possible scenario is for you, right? And then you go from there and you try and figure out, how do you get yourself out of that worst case scenario? And is the worst case scenario likely to happen? And if, is it really that bad, right? And it kind of trains, I guess it's a it comes from stoicism, right? It kind of trains your mind to have already dealt with the worst case scenario, so that when something bad happens, you're already
okay.
you're okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I wish I had that. Because there were so many times where like my brain would go in like crazy tangents and like, wackadoodle shit that I would think about, right? So, like this kind of helps you kind of get perspective.
Awesome. I love this. Shane, thanks for being so open. And
Yeah.
before we go to the Q&A, I have like two more things I wanted to discuss. One is COVID. What's your thoughts about the world post-COVID, or, hopefully we get post-COVID soon, but where do you see businesses and just life in general past that?
I live in Miami now, so I have a little bit of a different perspective from the New Yorkers. It's. I think people are people, and they will end up doing a lot of the same things that they did before. People are worried about restaurants, they're worried about events, they're worried about nightclubs, they're worried about, all this stuff that is really severely affected. There's definitely going to be the fallout of bankruptcies of these types of businesses, but the ones that will survive will prosper. I think that, at some point people are gonna, the vaccine is gonna come. I'm hopeful for that. And when it does, it'll be safe for people to go out, and they will. I saw it here in Florida, right? Like, when they lifted the lockdown, people started going out right away. People went to the mall. People, I didn't particularly, but I saw it, right? And now that's why the infections are up, right? And this is what you're seeing. It's going to be this wave because people are going to end up doing what they do. It's in their nature. It's not in our nature to stay home. It's in our nature to do things that are social. And so I think, obviously tech benefits from this greatly. And if you can do something in that sector right now, there's a lot of opportunity. But there's also a lot of opportunity in distressed things like restaurants and nightclubs and even real estate. That's, like retail real estate. Some people are predicting the death of retail real estate. I don't think it's going to be the death of it, but, it might be an opportunity to buy stuff for cheap.
Awesome.
Especially in New York.
Yeah, especially in New York. This is the thing. Like everyone, I'll always be a New Yorker, right? I grew up in New York, even though I've been living in Miami for the last 5 years or so. There's one thing I learned, you know, you never bet against New York. Even when you think it's like the bleakest it could be, New York will always win.
Yeah, and I recently read a book called 1948, New York in 1948, or New York 1948, something like that. It's a small read, and it talks about, it's a journalist that just writes about what's going on in New York City in that year, and it's really fascinating because I would say 80% is similarities of pre-COVID, right? And although this is different, although this has had a lot of different effects that we have not seen in a long time, we realize that New York will always be New York. It's going to come back, but it'll come back a little different, but a little bit better. And, you know, it will be fine, hopefully. So Shane, I got one more question for you, and then
Sure.
we're going to jump into Q&A because I know everyone's been waiting patiently to ask some questions. Any last, you know, any last things you want to leave the audience with, philosophy, strategies, or any insights in being an entrepreneur today?
Well, I think, you know, going back to, I'll just kind of give you some examples. I think that might be helpful. You know, you really, my biggest kind of piece of advice is, you know, it's not glamorous, right? Everybody thinks that being an entrepreneur is glamorous. There's all these books about it, and there's like all these like gurus out there that will tell you how to become a thing and how to do it. And it's like, there's no formula for it, okay? If there was, you know, everyone would just kind of follow these like footsteps. You can't read a book and become an entrepreneur. It's all about doing. There's this whole thing about, you know, ideas are cheap, you know, it's all about execution, right? That is 100% true, because all the businesses that I told you about, right? There was nothing like special about them, right? They weren't rocket science, right? They weren't patentable businesses or anything. It's just that I did them, right? And I executed on it, and I actually started. And so that remember, that's 95% of it, is just doing it, right? And you can't overthink things. And you know, even though you have doubts, you know, and you might overthink things, you have to press on and just make a decision, right? And know that even if you made a wrong decision in your business or whatever it may be, you can deal with the consequences and survive. And the last thing is that there will be people who tell you your idea or what you're doing is absolute shit. They will tell you that. So many people told me that, right? And it's like, I'll give you an example. Like, I had a relative, right? And I had created EZ Texting, and I really valued the opinion of this relative. And, you know, I built the alpha version and I showed it to them. And, you know, like, I was so excited, and, you know, it was my baby, right? I had spent like a month building this thing, and they looked at me and they said, you shouldn't be wasting your time, you know, with text messages worth pennies. You should be thinking about things that are worth hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars, like big money, not pennies, right? And it was like really demoralizing, right? And had I listened to that, it would have been, I would have had a much different story. Or even people who are much more successful than you, or quote unquote smarter than you, might say things that to you that will detract you. For, you know, for example, a couple of years into EZ Texting, I got invited to go to meet the CEO of Constant Contact, and they were a public company at that point, right? And I met with Gail Goodman, who was the CEO at that time, and I gave her a whole presentation. And, you know, we were doing a few $1 million in revenue. We had thousands of customers. We were, by all accounts, successful, you know, to that point. And at the end of the whole thing, she kind of looked at me and she was like, yes, but isn't this spam? Right? And it was so ironic that the CEO of an email service provider that allows people to send out blast emails was telling me that my service was spam. And you know, we're very obviously, like, we're not that, right? Like, we had opt-in and we have compliance tools and all that kind of stuff. But that goes to show you, right, that even like the super successful people, and really EZ Texting was just Constant Contact, but for SMS. You know, like, that's
right.
there's really, that's the only difference is the medium, right? Like there's like subtle differences with, you know, different functions and stuff, but I mean, it's essentially the same thing. But you know, and Ben Chestnut, who is the CEO and founder of MailChimp, wrote a whole blog article about how no one wants to get text messages on their phones and it's spam, and that's why they're not doing it, and how he thinks is no one would ever want it. But you know, at the end of the day, it's great that they thought that way, because had they not, they would have squashed me like a bug in the beginning. If they had created text messaging inside Constant Contact, I would have never been able to create EZ. They would have killed me. You know, they were the behemoth, right? It's like, it would have been my worst nightmare. So that's what I think that's the biggest thing is, you know, really kind of listen to people, but take everything with a grain of salt.
Awesome. I love it. And this has been great. Actually, one more thing. Any books that you suggest entrepreneurs read?
So I listen to a podcast, and I'm subscribed to a blog called Farnham Street. It's a gentleman named Shane Parrish, and it's FS.
How do you spell that? You said Fernan Street?
Farnham, FARNAM Street. It's fs.blog. And he talks all about mental models and, you know, talking about emotional grit, right? This helps a lot. And I get it every Sunday, right? And he also has a podcast where he, you know, has a lot of really interesting guests on. But I read his you know, his newsletter every Sunday, and it's about mental models and different ways of thinking about things and deciding and making decisions. And so, you know, whenever I'm stuck, you know, I go to his blog, and there are different things that help me a lot. And it's really great writing. And then the other thing, emotional fortitude, right? Again, I wish I had discovered this book like when I was in my 20s and not not so much later. There's the 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. It's like, I don't know, it's a very simple book. You can read it in maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. It's about 4 principles or agreements. I mean, I don't know if you want me to tell you what they are, but I can if you want. But if you kind of practice these agreements in your life and your business, you will have a much less anxious and pleasurable, much more pleasurable life as an entrepreneur or in your personal life. I highly recommend it, and I have to reread it a lot.
I would say that I don't want to read the book because I enjoy my anxiety. I've gotten used to it, and I don't want to mess that up for anything.
Yeah, look, it comes back, and you got to go back to it because it's hard. It's very, very simple, super hard to do.
For me, I feel like I learned that what I used to do is read a book and then put it aside, never read it again. But recently, over the last couple of years, I realized the power of rereading the book, because you think you remember everything, but you don't. And I don't do Audible because for whatever reason, I can't, like, I don't retain as much as reading. Reading for me retains more, even though it takes longer and I need to focus. I read. So Shane, we're going to jump into Q&A. Because we got a bunch of questions here. Is there anything else you wanted? I didn't mean to cut you off. Is there anything else you wanted?
No, sorry. I've talked enough. It's up to you.
No, this has been great, man.
Thank you so much.
It's amazing. So we
Thank
have a
you.
question from Patricia. She wants to know who was your most memorable mentor?
You know, again, it was probably my mom, honestly. You know, for me, my mom was ill my entire life. Well, her entire life, actually, from childhood. And so she had a really rough life. You know, she was in the hospital a lot. She had a lot of chronic disease, and despite that, she was very successful. You know, business person. Really kind of was an eternal optimist. You know, for her, life was always about the struggle and overcoming the struggle, and she never complained ever, despite the fact that she probably had more to complain about than anyone that I have ever met in my life, right? She never was like, oh, why is it me, or why did this happen to me, or you know, that kind of mentality did not exist for her. And you know, I think that, again, talking about emotional fortitude, right? Like being able to accept your circumstances and go through them and figure out a way out is, you know, is again 95% of the of the struggle of entrepreneurship, right? So for me, it definitely was my mom, and I think she had like most everything to do with it for me.
Fantastic. So our next question is from Mark. What was a scenario that at the time was very difficult or a struggle for you that ended up turning into a positive outcome? What was it like going through that time in your life?
Okay, in terms of the business, I would imagine, right?
I think it could be personal, but I guess we could do business.
Well, okay, I have a story from EZ Texting that I can tell you that was like probably my worst nightmare. And that worst nightmare ended up coming to save me in another nightmare situation that came up years later.
Okay.
It's kind of convoluted, but a couple of years into EZ Texting, I get a lawsuit. You know, I was served with a lawsuit, and it was a class action lawsuit. And I don't know if you ever heard of a class action. I didn't know what a class action was until this, but a class action lawsuit is one serious damn lawsuit. I can tell you that, right? It's like they only do really big companies. Usually, you know, like you hear class action lawsuits against Johnson and Johnson and stuff like that, right? Like, so it's a class action lawsuit where they named us and a couple of our clients that used our system, and they alleged that the people who received these text messages didn't consent to it. They didn't opt in, okay? And you'd be thinking, well, like, why are they, you know, why are they suing EZ Texting? We're just a platform, right? Like you come in, you craft your own message, you put your own list in. But, you know, there's this specific act called the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, which is a federal statute, and it protects people from basically, you know, getting spam calls, right? It's, and it's what the FCC uses to enforce, you know, people not spam calling you. And there's a lot of, let's say, penalties or fees that you have to pay when you break this law, right? And so, you know, they were looking for like, I don't know, $50 million in damages or some crazy amount, right? And then not only did we get one of them, but we got a couple of these, right? And in a few months thing. And as you can imagine, you know, I'd never dealt with this before, and you know, I have to get a lawyer. Lawyers cost, at least good lawyers cost tons of money, especially litigating lawyers that know how to deal with this type of thing, right? And it, you know, it was like if I lose, right, like everything's gone, right? Like I don't have enough money to pay this stuff, right? It was like death. It was a death sentence, basically. And it was many nights of sleeplessness. It was many nights of kind of researching and figuring out what I could do. But to make a long story short, essentially, I ended up having to figure out that I needed to go to Washington, D.C., have a meeting with the FCC and pay someone who can help me do that, right? And I've never done anything like this before. You have to understand, right? Like this isn't like, I didn't know what FCC matters are or whatever. And I did something called a petition for declaratory ruling because the law gives fax broadcasters an exemption, like eFax and those other types of companies. Somehow they got an exemption in the law because it doesn't make any sense. If someone uses your service to send out spam, you're not responsible for them. Just like if you take your cell phone and you send out spam, they're not going to sue AT&T and be like, AT&T, why'd you let them send spam, right?
I see,
right?
okay.
So anyway, I ended up figuring this out, and after years and a lot of money spent and a lot of sleepless nights and probably stress that I will never recover from, I figured this out, and I was able to kind of get us decoupled from these class action lawsuits and save the business, right? Even though it quite literally, you know, almost just the legal bills quite literally bankrupted me. But in any case, what ended up happening is years later, T-Mobile decided that they didn't like what we were doing because we had a medical marijuana dispensary using our text messaging service, and they didn't like, I guess, some sort of internal politics at T-Mobile, something crazy like that, didn't like the legalization of marijuana. And so they started blocking text messages to T-Mobile users from our service. Now, that doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but imagine if I sold you a cell phone again and told you, hey, you can use this cell phone to call everyone but T-Mobile people, right? You would never buy that cell phone, right?
Right.
Or T-Mobile people can't call you either, right? Like, it's just an incomplete service. It doesn't make any sense. It's one of the 4 biggest carriers, right? And so I was, you know, they were not cooperating. They were not listening. And so it was a David and Goliath situation. And what happened is that something in the law, in the law that of the initial lawsuits from the previous lawsuits that I had gone through, there was the class action lawsuits, ended up becoming the basis of the lawsuit that I put against T-Mobile, and ultimately they settled really quickly. So one thing that went bad years ago set up the stage to help me in another situation later. And that's it's kind of roundabout, and I'm trying not to be so technical because it's kind of esoteric stuff, but that's what you know. I'm glad that shit happened to me a long time ago, and it was horrible, and it was a, you know, really bad situation that I was in. But if I hadn't gone through that, I would have probably never been able to overcome the next lawsuit, essentially.
Fantastic. Love it. Very good. So Dre asks, is it worth learning to code in order to build wisely? Your coding acumen allowed you to launch in streamlining ways. I've had many tell me to devote the time to learn code, but rather hire developers. In short, what is the best approach to building a tech company in today's environment as a person of color, given the tech industry's lack of receptivity to those of color broadly? Sorry, I misspelled that.
So I'm a big proponent of people learning to code. And I think I actually wrote a blog about it today because I started teaching my kids about coding, and my daughter is only 6 years old. So I download apps with her, I play apps with her. I bought this thing called Cubetta, which kind of teaches kids how to, it's like a robot that kind of teaches kids how to do programming with physical things. It absolutely defined in many immeasurable ways, so many things that I was able to be successful at because it changed the way that I thought. You know, it helped me think in an organized manner. It helped me think stepwise. It kind of helped me think how things are interrelated. These are things that coding really helps you kind of tweak in the way that you think. But most of all, if you really want to do a code, you want to do a tech company, it's almost like owning a plumbing company and not knowing how to do plumbing. Right? You hire a bunch of plumbers to do the plumbing for you, but you don't even know how the plumbing works, right? So, it's hard to manage them. It's hard to know whether or not what they're telling you is right. It's hard to tell whether they're, bullshitting you about stuff, of whether it can be done or it can't be done, or the time frame that it takes to be done, or the cost that it would take, or whether or not it, like it's even feasible. That's the other thing is that coding allows you to understand how computers fundamentally work, and you can read between the lines of when you look at something and say, that can be done in software, that can be done better, that can be done in a different way. So absolutely, I think whether or not you're doing a tech company, you want to learn how to code, and you want to teach your kids how to learn to code. I'm not saying they have to be computer science majors or anything like that, but you really want that fundamental knowledge so that you can know what you're talking about. Otherwise you're going to be at the mercy of a bunch of other people who may or may not be bullshitting you. That's really the bottom line. And that's where I think I ended up being very lucky, is that I was able to build a team of developers, and I was able to speak to them in a way that kind of conveyed what was up here, effectively.
Awesome. I love it. Love it. Next question is with, do you have NTs? If so, what do you typically look for before deciding to mentor someone and spend your time? Do you have any recommendations for a young individual looking for mentors as a means of guidance?
I do have several mentors. They actually, my biggest mentor is significantly younger than me. So it's actually funny because he's a very successful guy in business, and I talk to him a lot about investing in business and just the way that he thinks. His name is Ryan Cohen, and he started Chewy. I'm not sure if you're familiar. He was the founder of Chewy. So he's a big mentor of mine, actually. I don't think he thinks that because we're kind of pretty good friends, but I really respect a lot of what he says and how he thinks. And in terms of me mentoring anyone, I do spend a lot of time with, the companies that I invest in, obviously, whenever the founders wanted to. I'm there to help them. I check up on them. I give them advice, just like I, kind of was telling you the different stories about what happened. I told them, like Residesk, the Residesk guys, right? I was like, the first 100 EZ Texting customers came from me picking up the phone and calling those people, not by like running ads, right? You got to pick up the phone and call them, right? And pick up, do the work and learn what your salespeople should be doing, right? So, there's things like that. And, I actually think, again, if you're looking for a mentor, I wouldn't really overthink it. I think a lot of people are willing to help you. Like there's so many people who, whether on LinkedIn or through one of these types of talks that I've done, or, that kind of, they reach out to me and they ask me for help. and I'm happy to, you know, answer their questions for them and help them however I can. And I think that that's true, you know, with anyone, you know, that you think that might be able to help you. If you're genuine about it, and you are you've done your research and you ask really smart, relevant questions, and you're engaged, and and it looks like you are someone who is helping themselves. Everyone wants to help someone who's helping themselves. That's the thing. It's like, I don't want to help someone who just kind of wants me to, you know, figure it out for them, right? I want someone who's kind of gotten to a point, and then, you know, they need a little bit of help to kind of go to the next step. I'm not going to sit there and spell it all out for you, right? That's I think no mentor really wants to do that. They want to see you try and figure it out first, and then help guide you from there. Sorry, I can't hear you.
I said, that's fantastic. I wish I would have known that when I was younger. I had a funny story about a mentor of mine who's still my mentor. He's an amazing guy. He's produced large festivals and thousands of events. So we ended up connecting because I got screwed on a project, and he got screwed by the same people I got screwed, but 2 different projects. So it was like, we just got together to complain about it. And I realized, like, he was so successful. And I said to him, I go, you know, could you teach me the business? Because I didn't know what mentor or mentorees was. I said, could you teach me a business? He goes, well, how much are you going to pay me? And I said, well, look, I could buy you a cup of coffee, and let's start with that, right? It was a funny joke. So he kind of liked that. And we ended up, I must have kept him there for 3 hours, I think, at the coffee shop. We just kept talking and talking and talking. And then I did what you're saying, is I would just call up and ask questions. And before you knew it, he was my mentor. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't like officially titled. It just became that way, right?
Right.
So I got one more question, Shane. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think, what do you call it? I think that's, I mean, unless they have further questions. I mean,
Okay.
it's really as simple as that.
Yeah, so one more question and we're wrapping up, because we're approaching 2 hours here, which I think this is great. Shane, you've been like on fire here. So last question is, what are the ways to identify the product/market fit for a business, and what metrics do you analyze to determine if product is the right fit for the market?
Okay. That's a really general question, and it really all depends on what kind of product you have, right? Like, if you have a physical consumer product, it's a different answer to a software product, to, I don't know, food products, to, you know, all these other things that are available. I can maybe just kind of hone it down to software if you want, and we can kind of focus on there. I think that the easiest way is to fake it. Pretend like you have the software, make a demo of it that doesn't really freaking work, and you make a video of it, make a landing page of it, and pretend like it's real. And call people up, run ads, see how the market is signing up for it, see how many signups you get, see how many people put in their credit card. You know, test your idea. It's a lot cheaper. You know, this is cliche stuff that I'm telling you. You know, you can read this in, like, I don't know, 1 billion business books, but it's true. You know, there's something to it. And, you know, if you see that people are signing up, I would take it as a cue that it's probably a good business. And then, you know, your key metrics change depending on the stage you're at in your company, right? What you know, when your first 100 customers is different, you know, than your 10,000th customer, right? Like, it all, you know, the metrics and the KPIs and all that kind of stuff that you want to be looking at are very different. You know, in the beginning, you might be willing to pay a lot more for a customer because you're just getting started. But then later you have to find efficiencies in acquiring those customers and make it worth it so that it's less than the lifetime value of the customer and you can be profitable. And, you know, investors want to see that. People who might want to acquire it want to see that, and you know, you want to make money ultimately, right? So that's the point of the business, right? So you know, it's how to identify the product. That's the $1 million question. You know, all I would say is, like, you know, look at how Junebug came about. You know, look around you, keep your eyes open. You know, that's what I did. I looked around myself and I saw the inefficiencies in the nightclub business, right? And it can be in the most mundane stuff that you never really think about, right? And you know, your life is unique to you, your situations are unique to you. And I bet you if you kind of just take time to look around, you'll see opportunity there.
Absolutely. Shane, thank you all. You've been amazing. This has been awesome.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
World of insight and information. You must be exhausted. Like, this has probably been like a lot of information given to us, and we thank you for your time.
I just hope I didn't bore you too much.
No, absolutely not. You've been awesome. This is great. And you know what? One word or one phrase or one sentence you might say might change an entrepreneur forever for the good. So we thank you for that. Thanks for being part of our community. And I think that's it. If you got anything else, we're wrapping up. Michael?
Yeah. Would it be possible for me to contact you, Jimmy and Shane, directly?
Sure.
Yeah, we can drop Shane's website down. I think I put it in earlier, but we can.
Yeah, I have my email there. I have my LinkedIn there. However, you guys want to do.
Great. Yeah, we'll put that in. Thank you so much. I mean, this was awesome.
Thank you.
Everything that you were saying, I was like, you know, this was phenomenal. I think a couple of things that really stuck with me too was, you know, the understanding coding and development. You know, having been building out our app, the amount of stuff that I've learned in the last couple of years, you know, just like working with our developers and stuff, changed my whole perspective on it. And I wish I would have known it much earlier when we were starting. It would have saved us a lot of time and money. And outsourcing too. I think I'm so like long on outsourcing, because you can build your company for a fraction of the cost if you do it right, have the right people to trust. And the other thing too, you were at the forefront of some of the biggest trends that have happened. So it's really cool that you've seen it. And texting right now is absolutely blowing up I mean, we've used EZ Texting for our events. We're using all these different platforms. Like, it's blowing up like crazy. I'm really curious, and I've been saving this the whole time, but what do you see as you were on the email marketing, you're on the texting. What's the next thing that you're seeing right now? Because I'm super fascinated by this, and I want to get your perspective, because you're at the early, you're right at the beginning of all of this, and billion-dollar companies have been built from what you started. Essentially.
I gotta tell you, I was not the innovator of this stuff.
But you were aware of it.
I didn't like come up with the original idea. I just thought it was a good idea and I executed on it. So like, I'm not giving myself that kind of credit at all, because it's not true. Like, you know, I saw in Europe they were doing EZ Texting, and I was like, well, why don't we do it here, right? You know, some interesting stuff that's going on is there's this technology called RCS, which is Relay Chat Service, and it's being implemented on Androids first, and it's going and eventually there are plans for Apple to kind of adopt this technology. And what it does is, like, I don't know if most people here are Android users, but right now texting on Android phones is kind of still rudimentary. It's nowhere near like what iMessage is like, right? And this is kind of the answer to iMessage for Android. And there's a whole chatbot ecosystem going on there. that's what I'm working on right now. So without giving it all away, but that, you know, I think these kind of chatbots, automated systems where, you know, they're secure and you can kind of, instead of calling the business, you can chat with the business, and it's partially automated. So like if you want to get your balance or you want to get your just some quick information, you can easily do that. And then if you kind of need to get to if you need to get to a human, they'll help you with that as well, through chatting. That might be one of the next things. We'll see.
Yeah, you can see it already starting to, but I think it has a long way to go. But I love it. I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you, Shane. I just wanted to throw that out there real quick at the end because I love this whole interview. Thank you for your time. Like you
sure, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.